My dad initially declined to walk me down the aisle, opting instead for a Hawaii trip with my older sister, his clear favorite. But with just 5 days left until my wedding, everything changed dramatically. My 26-year-old self is navigating through all this chaos, largely thanks to my sister and dad. For context, my dad has been my sole parent for the past decade, following my mother's death from a prolonged battle with cancer when I was just 16. It was an incredibly tough time, especially realizing I no longer had someone solely in my corner. My sister Katie, 2 years my senior, has always been a challenge. She's 10 times more annoying and entitled than anyone I know. Growing up, she treated me like a personal servant while my dad often indulged her whims. Despite our mother treating us equally, my dad clearly favored Katie after her passing. Katie, once a sickly child, outgrew her ailments but continued to feign illness to dodge responsibilities. Consequently, I took on all household chores while she lounged in her room. I found her behavior infuriating, but protesting only resulted in my dad siding with her, believing her frailty act. This dynamic persisted, making life unbearable at times. Once I turned 18 and moved out for college, things began to improve for me. Living away from Katie meant I no longer had to endure her demands and constant needling. After college, we had no contact. We never got along, and I didn't miss her. She not only made me do all the chores, but also made every interaction unpleasant with her snide remarks and attempts to provoke me. Although Dad was blatantly biased towards Katie, I still had a good relationship with him, despite the fights and protests over the years. He was my father, and despite his favoritism, we would always reconcile in the end. I met Andy during college, and after nearly 8 years together, we decided to get married this year. Both of us are doing well in our careers, and it felt like the right time. Katie, on the other hand, hasn't been doing well lately and moved back in with Dad after graduation. She had lived on her own for a few years but returned home last year. Katie made the decision to leave her job and join a friend in their jewelry business. Unfortunately, their venture was ill-prepared and lacked research. They dove in without proper planning, leading to inevitable failure. Despite raising investment funds from family and friends, they quickly burned through it all with little to show. After the business folded, Katie found herself unemployed for nearly 6 months. Instead of actively seeking new opportunities, she's become reliant on Dad, who had been planning for retirement in a couple of years. We've recently clashed over this. I believe Katie needs to take initiative and find employment, rather than depend on our aging father indefinitely. Dad insists she needs time to recover emotionally before committing to anything new. Our differing perspectives often lead to arguments, so we've avoided discussing it. Complicating matters, I got engaged shortly after Katie's business failed. Dad believes her resentment stems partly from seeing her younger sister thriving while she struggles. I know she's envious of my current success, as she often posts passive-aggressive remarks on social media, pretending everything is fine while clearly struggling. It seems like every time Katie posts something online, it's for attention. She often portrays herself as a victim, lamenting how I've supposedly manipulated my way to success while she deserves better. The reality is, I've achieved what I have through hard work, not manipulation. Katie's own choices have led to her troubles except for one recent event. Her cat passed away 3 weeks ago after almost 15 years together. She was devastated, understandably so, and it affected her deeply. My dad told me how bad things were. I felt sympathy but kept my distance, busy with wedding preparations just weeks away. I wanted to offer condolences, but I didn't want it to seem insincere, so I asked my dad to convey my message. Katie's grief worsened her already depressed state to the point where she wouldn't eat, and my dad struggled to motivate her to get out of bed. It was tough to witness, and while I comforted my dad from a distance, I had to focus on my own preparations. Little did I know this would soon cause trouble for me. A few days ago, when my dad contacted me to say he couldn't walk me down the aisle at my wedding, I was taken aback. I had assumed it would be him, especially after formally asking him the day before. Initially, he didn't give an immediate answer, which raised my suspicions. The next day, he called to decline, citing a reason that left me dumbfounded. He explained that Katie had recently cremated her cat, and now she wanted to scatter its ashes on a beach in Hawaii. Years ago, Katie had taken the cat on a memorable trip there with friends, and the place held special significance for her. Since my wedding fell exactly a month after the cat's passing, she wanted to scatter the ashes on that day. Not only did my dad refuse to walk me down the aisle, but he also said he couldn't attend my wedding at all. He apologized profusely and promised to make it up to me later. He felt compelled to accompany Katie because she hadn't expressed interest in anything for weeks and specifically requested his emotional support. I was furious, but I tried to remain calm. I suggested Katie could go with a friend or delay the scattering by a day, but my dad insisted on being there for her emotionally. Desperate for at least one parent to attend my wedding, I pleaded with my dad. He explained Katie's adamant stance and admitted he'd already suggested alternatives, hoping to accommodate both of us. But when he proposed other plans, she grew upset, accusing him of disregarding her feelings. According to her, I'd have plenty of supportive people around on my big day, while she only had our father. She believed she should be the priority due to her current struggles. When Dad agreed with her, saying she needed priority right now, I snapped. I lashed out, telling him she'd always been his priority, so it wasn't surprising he was choosing her over me on my wedding day. Without letting him respond, I hung up and blocked him everywhere. I was devastated and shared everything with Andy, who empathized with me. I cried for days, but then I decided to take action to provoke my father, knowing it would upset him. Instead of dwelling on it, I asked my uncle to walk me down the aisle. He's Dad's twin brother, and they've never gotten along. I've witnessed their animosity since childhood, whenever they met at family gatherings. During family events and gatherings, my dad and his twin brother would constantly vie to outdo each other, making things awkward for everyone around them. Despite our grandparents' efforts to mediate, their mutual animosity made it nearly impossible to contain. Over time, they grew apart, and after Mom's passing, Dad avoided any occasion where Uncle would be present. Personally, I didn't harbor ill feelings toward my uncle. I understood the dynamics of sibling rivalry, but we weren't particularly close either. After the upsetting conversation with Dad, I was so enraged that I reached out to Uncle and asked him to walk me down the aisle. He was taken aback by my request, as we weren't especially close, but I explained it was to spite Dad for his recent actions. That was all the convincing he needed. He eagerly agreed, finding humor in the opportunity to ruffle his brother's feathers. Uncle chuckled when I proposed the idea, joking that even in their 50s he wouldn't miss a chance to embarrass Dad. We decided to announce it publicly, knowing it would surely reach him. That evening, I posted my gratitude for Uncle agreeing to walk me down the aisle. Within hours, Dad called me, a conversation I unblocked him specifically to have. He began by expressing, "My dad was deeply upset when he found out I had approached my uncle to walk me down the aisle, replacing him. He promised to talk to Katie about delaying the scattering of the ashes, but insisted I let him take his rightful place at my side. He argued it would be embarrassing and insulting for him to see my uncle walk me down when he was still alive and well. I reminded him that he had the chance to be there for me, but chose Katie instead. I admitted to being petty and immature, but I felt he deserved a taste of his own medicine. This only made him more upset. He accused me of lacking empathy and behaving cruelly toward my sister, who had lost so much. By the end of our call, he was in tears, saying he never expected this from me just because he wanted to support Katie during her difficult time. Reflecting on his words, I realized my actions may have been insensitive. He was right about my sister's struggles, and now I'm torn about whether I owe him an apology. Should I apologize to Dad for asking my uncle to walk me down the aisle after he declined, especially since my sister wanted him by her side in Hawaii on my wedding day? Update. With just 2 days until the wedding, I've decided to walk down the aisle alone. It seems more fitting given the realization that ultimately, I'll be on my own. As of now, we still haven't resolved things with my father regarding the wedding. At this point, I'm not sure what other options I have. Update. So, first things first. I got married yesterday. It feels surreal to say that I'm now married, with both my engagement ring and wedding band on my finger. I'm incredibly happy right now. However, I owe you all a detailed update, considering my last message was more of a rant and left things hanging. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, my father did not attend the wedding. As far as I know, he chose to accompany my sister to Hawaii to scatter the ashes of her deceased cat. Some might see this as a reasonable choice over attending his other daughter's wedding, but I won't dwell on that. I received criticism for seemingly not taking my sister's depression seriously. Let me clarify. I genuinely empathize with her. Depression is a serious matter, and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, not even Katie. Ironically, despite everything, she's probably my worst enemy. It wasn't depression that led her to scatter the ashes in Hawaii on my wedding day. It was her intense need to undermine me and hog the spotlight. She could have waited a few days or done it earlier, but she chose that exact day. I don't think it's coincidental. She's always had something against me. So, I can't accept that this was just depression manifesting. Regardless, while depression might explain her actions, it doesn't. So yeah, I'm not mocking her struggles, but I also won't excuse her actions just because she's going through a tough time. As for my dad, well, that's a whole other story. I'm at a loss for words except to say he's let me down yet again. This time, forgiveness won't come easy. It's daunting facing life without any supportive parents in my corner, but let's face it, he's never been in my corner anyway. For him, life has always revolved around Katie, and that's painfully clear to me now. I was naive to think anything would change. He chose not to attend my wedding and handled it tactfully by not informing me until after the ceremony. Until then, I was left wondering whether he'd show up. I had left him a message earlier, but he never responded. Throughout the ceremony, I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message. It wasn't until after I walked down the aisle and everything was said and done that I realized he wouldn't be there. That's when he finally texted me, saying he was in Hawaii with Katie, attending the scattering of the ashes because she needed him more emotionally than I did. He apologized but hoped I would understand. I might have found his message more meaningful if he hadn't also criticized my earlier actions with my uncle as petty and immature. He felt it was best for us to stay apart for a while, partly due to that incident. I won't deny it was petty, but my reasons were rooted in feeling consistently overlooked since my mom's passing. I'm not going to pretend that my actions weren't immature, but what other choice did I have? I just wanted to provoke a reaction from my dad, to know if he cared at all. Clearly, whatever concern he had wasn't enough to show up for me on my wedding day. His message annoyed me, so on the day of my wedding I blocked him and focused on being happy. His decision not to attend made his message about not coming redundant. When people asked why my father and sister were absent, I didn't hide the truth. I told them exactly what happened. It seemed more a reflection on them than on me. Most were speechless. Some found it sadly amusing. Now, pretty much the whole family knows my dad skipped my wedding to go to Hawaii with Katie to scatter her cat's ashes. His inability to spare even a single day for me feels like his biggest failure as a father. Despite all this, I had a fantastic time, and nothing can change that. My wedding day remains the best day of my life so far. Update 3. It's been a week since the wedding, and saying that still feels amazing. Andy and I are getting ready for our honeymoon in a few days. However, my dad and Katie couldn't bear to see me happy. They've chosen this time to confront me. Regarding what I told people at the wedding about why they weren't there, 3 days ago Katie texted me. I hadn't blocked her initially, just my father. But after reading her text, I felt inclined to block her as well because her message was incredibly annoying. For the record, the only reason I haven't blocked her completely is that if something were to happen to my father, I'd want to know. Despite our differences, I trust she'd inform me of any accidents or illnesses. That's the sole reason she still has access to me. While many would advise going no contact, I don't find it possible because being a bad father doesn't mean I have to be a bad daughter to him. This might not make sense to everyone, but these are my morals, and I'm sticking to them. So, I'd appreciate it if people refrain from commenting on this. Now, regarding her message, Katie said, "Hey, we're back from Hawaii, and many relatives have already contacted us. They believe it was wrong to scatter my cat's ashes on your wedding day. I'm not surprised you chose to spread this story and paint us in a negative light. I'm just disappointed that you're still targeting me, especially knowing the tough time I'm going through. I wish you hadn't spoken negatively about Dad and me because we're family, and you of all people should understand how hard it is to lose a loved one. I truly hoped you'd show more compassion. As for me, that's clearly not the case. Dad has also noticed you've blocked him, and he's quite upset about it. I suggest you reconsider that. Honestly, I think you need to be more considerate towards us. You can't go through life only thinking about yourself and expect everyone to accept that. I hope you grasp what I'm saying and apologize. Even if you don't, I won't be surprised because If you're still choosing to criticize me now, I don't expect much from you. The tone of her message really angered me, and the content. I don't even want to comment because it might lead me to curse her out right here. It was so self-righteous and sanctimonious that initially I wanted to block her. However, after reflecting, I decided to compose my own response and sent it back to her. Hey Katie, I did inform our relatives about why you and Dad were absent at the wedding, and I chose to be truthful because I'm not a liar. By deciding not to attend my wedding, you effectively placed yourselves in that situation. It's unfair to expect me to cover for you, especially given the circumstances. Both of you have treated me poorly. You couldn't even prioritize me on my wedding day for just one day, so I see no reason to apologize. If Dad regrets being blocked, he should have thought about it earlier instead of now. My decision is final. I don't want any contact with either of you. After showing it to Andy, I sent that message. She replied just a couple of minutes ago, saying she'll respect my wishes. She also mentioned that Dad is still very upset about my decision not to communicate with them. However, I believe they've brought this upon themselves. I know Katie is probably relieved she won't have to talk to me anymore, and if Dad is truly upset, well, that's his own doing. Anyway, I'm going to focus on enjoying my honeymoon now. We've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I deserve to have some fun.